Good morning, and welcome to those of, good morning, I like that reply. To those of you joining us virtually, and those of you present here on this cold morning at All Souls Unitarian Church of Indianapolis. I am Sandy Reed Ryberg, and my pronouns are she, her. I will be serving as the worship associate for today's service, together with Sarah Cannon, our Director of Children's and Community Programming, pronouns she, her, and Reverend Katie, our Senior Minister, pronouns she, ella. We are your worship team on the chancel today. If you are visiting with us this morning, we are so glad you are here with us. We invite you and everyone present to please complete a connection card, which you'll find at the end of each pew. This card helps us know how to best stay connected with you and support you on life's journey. We welcome you and invite you to bring with you this morning your whole self as you join us in worship. And please know that if you would like some extra support on this life's journey, our caring team is an extension of the ministry team and is here to support you. You can reach them by calling All Souls and leaving a voicemail message, or by emailing pastoralcare@allsoulsindy.org. Our Soul Matters theme this month is change. Seems like a perpetual theme, doesn't it? Sign up for or check in the know to get the packet about this so that you can engage with the materials at home or at All Souls in person or online. Thank you.
And now for the sacrament of announcements. Somebody had a really special birthday this week. Nancy Bainey turned 80. Happy birthday. And Ada also had a birthday this week. Happy birthday, Ada. We have two wonderful things happening today. There is a family potluck up in the BD room, and also you are invited to participate. Everyone is invited to participate in our interactive coffee hour today. It's a group game about our UU principles, sources, and some prominent figures in our Unitarian Universalist history. Nasreen will be announcing the rules in Harris Hall right across the way after service. So you do not have to participate if you just want to hang out with your cup of coffee to fuel up before the Colts game, but I invite you to. I plan to. It's going to be great fun. Friendsgiving is happening this Thursday. Please check in the know so you can sign up on Sign Up Genius. We're going to set up at 2 p.m. and dinner will be at 3. I could certainly use some extra hands. I want to let you know that we have a new COVID policy that the board voted on this Wednesday, and I want you to know that masks are always welcome. We actually have some pews in the back of the sanctuary that are mask only, and they're labeled, and here's the reason they're in the back. If you want to be masked and you don't want to be around people who are unmasked and you don't want people singing near you, those are the best seats in the house. We are currently, according to COVID Act Now, in a low risk level. That means no masks are required in the building and singing may occur without masks. So you are invited, if you feel called, to remain masked always, anywhere in the building, or during low to be unmasked, including singing in the sanctuary. We're going to send the whole policy out later this week so that you can take another look at it. It is my pleasure to introduce someone really special today. Amanda Thomas is with us, and Amanda Thomas is a lifetime Unitarian Universalist, a troubadour, a vocal coach, and accomplished artist in her own right. Amanda has served congregations in the Chicagoland area as a music director and is helping us out here for a few Sundays as we navigate this interim period. So please give Amanda a warm All Souls welcome. And Amanda and I together are the core team for a really special service this year with Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries. And I'm happy to talk to you about that some more sometime, but keep an eye out. This is a big deal and there'll be more news coming. In this moment on our shared journey, may you feel witnessed and honored wherever you are. May you remember that whether you are here for the first time or the thousandth, whomever you are, whomever you love, whatever your ability, gender, beliefs, political affiliation, or documentation status, you are welcome here and you are never alone. Let us now greet our neighbors, especially new and returning people. I gift you these words by Kimberly Quinn Johnson, inspired by June Jordan in a poem for South African women, which was presented at the UN on August 9th, 1978. The Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson says, "We're the ones we've been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest and face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we've been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we've been waiting for."
I'm singing. Sorry. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, keep singing, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Reminds us to continually renew our promise to live into our covenant, to put love into action, and to live out the community of love and justice we aim to be. Please rise in body or spirit as we say these adapted chalice lighting words from James Philip Blake. the same words we have spoken since 1903. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant.
Sorry, had my place marked and now I lost it, trying to light a candle. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. Do you know why? Because it's simply about sharing food and being thankful for that food. No gifts to buy and wrap, no fireworks, no candles to blow out, just turkey or tofu, sweet potatoes, and pumpkin pie. This holiday is rather unique to the United States. Only 4 or 5 other countries have an official Thanksgiving holiday like we do. President Abraham Lincoln established Thanksgiving in 1863 because our country needed something during the Civil War to make us feel more united. During World War II, President Franklin Roosevelt made the day even more official as the 4th Thursday in November. Have you heard of the Mayflower? Does the name Peregrine White ring any bells of recognition for you? Well, he was born on the Mayflower, and he was my ancestor. Yeah. It turns out that one of his children married someone who was my great-great-great-great-grandfather, so he's my relative by marriage. My ancestral family is likely what is referenced in the first Thanksgiving story. The story of the first Thanksgiving has been told in a way that leaves out a lot of bad things that happened in those days. The Native Americans and the Europeans who came to their land did not always have peaceful relationships, and Europeans did not keep the promises they made to the people who were already living here. This Thursday, when my grandchildren and I sit down to have turkey and corn and pumpkin pie, I can tell them the history of this holiday in a way that is more honest than how it was told to me. Sarah Cannon is going to share a lot of that story with us in a few minutes. I will be able to tell my grandchildren that we now have a chance to make up for some of the awful things that happened to Native Americans because of Europeans coming into their land. I can tell them that our church is working hard to remember both my ancestors, who were called pilgrims, some of them were Unitarians, and the Wampanoag people who shared food with them 400 years ago. I can tell them that Thanksgiving should always be about sharing food with everyone who is around us, no matter who their ancestors were. Thank you.
There we go. Good morning. Aw, it's so nice to see everybody's faces today. Some of you, I'm getting to see more of your faces than I've seen for kind of a while. So that's exciting. So, as Sandy mentioned, I'm going to talk to you all today about stories and how we tell our stories. Because when I was a kid, probably like most of us here, I grew up with a story about the first Thanksgiving, and the story was basically that the Pilgrims, who were brave immigrants from England who came to the New World, or what is now America, had struggled, but they survived, partly because of help from their friendly neighbors, the Indians, who they called that because an early European explorer of this New World had been lost and had thought he found the country of India, right? Which is another halfway around the world from America. But even though the name Indian was wrong, the Pilgrims kept using it. We still sometimes have that problem today. But anyway, the Indians had mostly been friendly and had helped the Pilgrims survive, and now the Pilgrims invited the Indians to a Thanksgiving feast to celebrate that, and everybody had turkey and cranberry sauce and was happy, the end. Right? And that story, the one I grew up with, is just wrong. It's wrong because of some things that if you were listening, you maybe already heard me point out. Starting with the fact that the New World wasn't new, right? Just new to the Europeans who had just gotten there. This was already someone else's home, and the Europeans treated it like it was something that they could just take for themselves. The people who lived on this land weren't Indians. They were people of many nations and tribes. And they had lots of different languages, lots of different ways of doing government, lots of cultures and histories of their own. The people in this particular story that took place in Massachusetts were the Wampanoag. And the story is wrong about the historical facts, too. The Pilgrims weren't having Thanksgiving. They were having what they called a rejoicing. Gratitude for them would have been expressed through fasting. So not only would they not have been eating turkey and cranberries, they would not have really been eating anything at all. And they would have been praying. On the other hand, a rejoicing is rowdy. In fact, the Pilgrims were celebrating their survival that day by shooting things just for fun, like shooting their guns, boom, boom, and shooting their cannons. They were making a lot of noise. And the Wampanoags nearby heard this huge ruckus of guns and cannons, and they jumped to the logical conclusion. There was some kind of fight happening. They didn't know who all was fighting. They didn't know who was winning. So they decided to go and see, and about 100 Wampanoag arrived, a fighting force, to investigate all that noise and see if they needed to intervene. Now, the history that was written down about this day was written by the Europeans, and they didn't explain exactly what was said between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoags, maybe something like, could you cut that out? We don't know how they avoided fighting with each other on that day, but what was written down says that the Wampanoags stayed and partied with the Pilgrims for 3 days after that incident. This might just be me, but I kind of think maybe they thought, we should hang around for a little while and make sure this doesn't start up again. And they did all eat together, but they feasted on locally available food, which would probably have mostly been seafood and venison. Anybody know what venison is? What is it? Ada, what is it? It's deer meat, indeed, and maybe some corn-based dishes as well. Now, that by itself isn't too bad a story, but unfortunately that moment of sharing and friendship would not last. The Wampanoags and almost all the other indigenous people of this country would eventually lose almost all of their lands to the Europeans. Many of them would die. Languages and cultures and histories would be suppressed, squished down in favor of European language and culture and story. And when I know all of that, the old story I grew up with, the one most Americans have been telling for 400 years, it's not just wrong because it gets the facts wrong, it's wrong because it gets the whole point of the story wrong. The Wampanoags weren't sure they could trust the Pilgrims, and they were right to be worried. And this is very important for UUs to know, because we have a lot of history in Massachusetts, we do, where this happened, and the woman who worked really tirelessly to convince President Abraham Lincoln to make Thanksgiving a holiday, Sarah Josepha Hale, she had connections to Unitarian churches. She also wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb, so if that song really annoys you, now you know. Yeah. So UUs at our General Assembly back in 2016 voted to pass a resolution about how UUs should treat Thanksgiving. They said that we should all spend some time learning about the real history of the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims. They also said that UU churches should listen to and learn from the indigenous people in our communities so that maybe we can find some things that we can do to be in solidarity with them and to support their goals. Because the true story of Thanksgiving kind of stinks, if we're being honest. But we don't have to settle for the way things have been up to now. We get to write the next part of this story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I just want to rest with that story for a minute. Let us carry that truth with us into this moment where we hold the joys and sorrows of this community and the world at large. Within this community recovering from surgery and illness, we hold in our hearts Elaine Mancini, Barbara Krall, and Karen Downing. I invite us to open our hearts a little bit more to hold the protesters in Iran. And may that opening of our hearts continue to hold all of our transgender beloveds. Today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, and this comes after Transgender Awareness Week. You'll notice at the front of our sanctuary that we have a flag that's different than what used to be there. The original multicolored rainbow flag was designed by artist Gilbert Baker around 1977-ish, 1978. And this flag was designed by Daniel Quasar, which combined the transgender pride flag, which was designed by Monica Helms in 1999, with the original rainbow flag. And he did this for a really important purpose. He added the black and brown stripes to represent the marginalized LGBTQ communities of color and community members that were lost to HIV and AIDS, as well as those currently living with AIDS. He reshaped the new flag colors as a chevron to represent the need for us to go forward and continue pushing with the movement for justice. He did this to shift the focus, and specifically to continue to keep the attention on the need to support Black and brown, queer and trans people and those living with HIV and AIDS. May this flag serve as a reminder of what is important as well as the movement ahead of us. I invite you now to enter with me into a moment of prayer with these words by the Reverend Ninan Soto. Dear trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender-expansive friends and kin, and those of us whose gender is survival, let me explain. No, there's too much. Let me sum up. You are not hard to love and respect. Your existence is a blessing. Your pronouns are not a burden or a trial. They are a part of your name, just shorter. Someone getting them wrong is not a poor reflection on you. It is not your fault. Your body really and truly belongs to you, no one else. The stories of your body, the names of your body's parts, your body's privacy, the sum of your body's glory. It's not okay for anyone to press their story of you back to the beginning of our liberation. We will find the people ready to be on the freedom for the people way, and we will go on. No one can rename you other. It can't stick as you offer the gift of being and saying who you are. Mostly, though, your stories belong to you. Your joy and complexity are beautiful, however you may choose to tell it or not tell it. Some folks, cis, may take their liberty for an unholy license. You are beloved. Please keep to our shared tasks of healing, getting free. Let us hold the silence together. May all hearts be restored on this journey to freedom for all. May it be so.
Each week, we gather together to align our giving with our values. We give to support the missions and ministries of our congregation, and we share half of our weekly offering with an organization whose values align with ours. This week, we are donating to Trinity Haven Indy. Trinity Haven provides housing options and supportive services for LGBTQ young adults who are experiencing housing instability. A recently deceased family member of the Clear family, our former minister, Reverend Bruce Clear's memorial celebration was yesterday. Kelsey Kennedy was very active with this organization, and we honor them for that with our contributions today. May we now gratefully receive our morning offering. Thank you.
Choir, that was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Liz. Grace and mercy. Have you ever been on the receiving end of someone's mercy? It's the kind of gift that can bring you to tears or bring you to your knees. When someone offers a bit of grace and accepts you in your fullness and gives you mercy that you haven't earned. Sometimes it can help us to then go on and feel like we want to be worthy of that grace and mercy, you know, that we want to do better so that we can earn it and so that we can offer it to others. I had one of those moments. Once upon a time, I was really tense and focused in my career. I was working PR and marketing, and we were the on-the-ground team for this religious leader, rock star, Michael Bernard Beckwith. He has a 9,000-member church called Agape International. Like Christina Aguilera is in his church. He's amazing. he and his then wife, Ricky Byers Beckwith, were in our small town, and we got to work with them. We, these two feisty, fierce women who beat out all the boys club for this contract to work with these two amazing individuals, and we had prepped to the umpteenth degree, and we were doing interview after interview after interview one day, and we had pre-discussed all the questions with all the reporters. We know how that goes. Well, in one of the interviews, a reporter sort of tossed a zinger at Reverend Beckwith, and I didn't stop the interview. And I was like frozen in my fear because I didn't stop the interview. Because he like really quickly came right back and was like, hey, here's how it is. And it was a question about our LGBTQ beloved. They quoted him and said, well, when you were with Oprah's spiritual support team, you said that you believe that LGBTQ community is beloved by God and that God doesn't make mistakes. And he said, absolutely. Our LGBT community is beloved and holy. And I don't know why I felt like I needed to protect him in answering that question because he's theologically grounded and it's 100% appropriate, but I did, maybe because I was wound super tight, right? So after the interview, I kind of sheepishly go to him and I was like, so that question, you know, it wasn't in the list that we decided on with your people and I didn't stop the interview. And he's like, yeah, I'm a grown-up and I can answer questions about my beliefs. He's like, y'all are doing a great job. Sister, breathe. Breathe. We're gonna talk about some hard things today. Breathe. We're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay. Grace and mercy are necessary in healing, and we need both to heal this broken and fractured world that we're in. I read a story some years ago. You're gonna hear me tell it a lot because it's like scripture to me. It's something I return to over and over and over again. It's about a young woman who was working in South Africa, volunteering to help end post-apartheid practices that are a lot like our Jim Crow and new Jim Crow laws here in the US. She was killed by two young boys who were angry about their treatment and they were throwing stones at cars. Her family was grief-stricken, but their faith called them to do something more. So over a period of time, they got to know the boys who were convicted of their daughter's murder. They fought for their release and began a nonprofit with them in South Africa. And they continue to do the work that needs to be done there. Grace and mercy. When we are injured, it's easy to wrap our hurt and anger around ourselves like a shield. And we have a right to our anger, absolutely. We never have to put ourselves in a situation where someone can do more harm to us. And yet, there comes a time when we need to embrace forgiveness, if possible, through a process of reconciliation, but not without a power analysis. And understanding what power we hold in these conversations that we enter into with reconciliation. Valerie Kaur encourages us to let the stories of others into our hearts, to find out where their pain is so we can build bridges from our heart to theirs. In Mark 2:17 of the Christian scriptures, Jesus says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, whoever they are, but the sinners. That's a good thing, right? I know we don't talk about sin a lot. We should. It means missing the mark, and we all miss the mark. And if we don't talk about missing the mark, then we can't own our stuff, and we can't make it right. We don't have to let shame keep us from doing the right thing. Give shame the boot. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that we are born of original blessing, and we mess up a lot. So it's comfort for me to read scripture that calls me in when I miss the mark, so that I can remember that no matter what I've done, the path to redemption, grounded in relationship and power analysis, it's there for me. And we humans, we cause harm every day. When we think about that Rob Eller, Isaac's model I've been talking about a lot, where we work within, we work among as a congregation and in our spheres of influence, and then we work beyond them in the larger world, and then we keep reflecting back on that within work, that model. When we do that, we can think a little bit about some of our everyday actions in our world among, where we're kind of going about our business, where we're actually doing harm, sometimes to our neighbors. For instance, a trip to the grocery store that we might think is a simple trip, if we're purchasing certain tomatoes, we're contributing to unfair labor practices that are harming our migrant community neighbors. And I've served in communities as a chaplain where all everyone's asking for is a penny more per pound of tomatoes picked to have a decent life and care for families. Irreparable harm is done with our purchases sometimes. So along with grace and mercy, we need to educate ourselves, and we need a sense of responsibility to own what we've done in a situation. And you know what? There's even an app for that. There's an app that can help you to make choices on where you shop and what you do. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it educationally. And then we get to commit to not doing that harmful thing again. And another piece to this puzzle is reconciliation. Now, in 2008, the Canadian government was forced to set up truth and reconciliation processes to face their responsibility for the residential schools they set up that had stolen young Indigenous people from their tribes and stripped them of their history and their culture. According to Facing Our History, truth and reconciliation commissions are often a way for perpetrators and victims to publicly acknowledge episodes of violence between them. Such commissions provide a space for former enemies to bridge their differences. For the most part, they're designed to bring about processes of healing, processes that offer victims solace and reassurance that their trauma will not be repeated. Facing Our History continued to say that in Canada, the commission was focused almost exclusively on victims and their experiences. While there were many problems with the truth and reconciliation process in Canada, I do think that centering the story and care of the harmed was important. Personally, I feel like it takes a lot of strength and fortitude to do that. Some of us are going to be around holiday tables this week with people who might have different ideas and ways of being in the world than us. They may have even hurt us. We may have had falling outs with these family members, and we might be nervous about entering into those spaces. Breathe. Be gentle with yourself. What is it you need for your self-care? And do you need a safety plan? Like, do you have allies in the space where you can say, if I do the Carol Burnett, I need you to get me out of that conversation. I need you to intervene. Do you need to have a friend that can call you at certain times during the day so that you have a way to get away from that table? Think about if you need that, because we want to take care of our care first. We can't just move into reconciliation if someone hasn't done their work and we haven't had the support and care that we need if we're the person that's been injured, right? And if you feel like it's time to enter into those transformative conversations, are you also willing and able to hold their story in your heart, to see them as a part of you that you do not yet know, as Guru Nanak teaches? From that place of welcoming the sinner, can you move forward? And can you show mercy while also expecting accountability? Because, sometimes we put pressure on people with marginalized identities to teach us what we did wrong and then to hold the forgiveness of us when we've made the mistake. And that's not okay. That's asking people that have been harmed to do even more work. This is why we need to have sometimes separate spaces of healing and a process for truth and reconciliation that is grounded in accountability. So might you have that space at your Thanksgiving table? I'm not sure. And what if you're the person who caused harm? Because we do. We're human. Can you offer yourself enough grace to accept that you've caused harm and center the story of your loved one to find out what you need to do to make things right? And then do the work to make it right, even if it's hard, uncomfortable, or inconvenient. Returning to the real story of Thanksgiving, it's also important for us to hold on this day that for many Native American people, Thanksgiving is a day of mourning. In November of 2020, UUA President Susan Frederick Gray shared this in a letter, quote, "In 2016, Unitarian Universalists voted to pay special attention to learning our history and rethinking Thanksgiving. Historically, UU ministers were instrumental in creating this U.S. holiday of the Pilgrims and the Indians pageant tradition that roots the holiday in an historically inaccurate and harmful colonial narrative. Many UU congregations in New England can trace their lineage directly back to settler congregations that had a role in the genocide of Native communities. As a religious tradition, we cannot decide who we will be without reckoning with the truth of who some of our ancestors were. For some of us, these are biological ancestors. For others, they may be religious ancestors. So what does it mean to reconcile this truth? I think this Thanksgiving table is getting very busy. For some of us, the stories of our Native American ancestors who were killed by disease, forced from their homes, murdered, abused, stolen from their people, this lives in our bodies' cells. And I hope you're caring for yourself in this space and know that I'm here for you later if you want to talk. It's a hard time. Centuries of oppression and violence at the hands of white settlers affects our economic, social, physical, familial, and psychosocial landscape to this day. And then there's those of us who have the DNA of the colonizer and the colonized in our bodies. What do you need to heal on this day of mourning and gathering? How can your faith community support you in your faith development? I also can't help but think of those whose ancestors, like Sandy's, thank you for saying that, Sandy, built this nation and were literally at the ground zero of causing harm with Native populations while also creating privileges we all enjoy today to varying degrees. So what does it mean to reconcile the Thanksgiving season as it is now, as it was in 1620? And how do we act knowing those truths from a different space going forward now? Now, many UU congregations have a practice of doing a land acknowledgement at the start of their services as part of their process of reconciliation. Susan Frederick Gray mentioned in her letter, some of them trace their lineage back to the first settlers, and as Sarah mentioned, Unitarians had that hand in retelling that false story. Many of us have as well, because we've shared what was told to us, which perhaps is another reason that we need actual history in history books. But a land acknowledgement can't just come from nowhere. It's got to come from research to fully understand whose land we reside on. And we've not, to my knowledge, done that work here. Now, I've done some research online. I am not a researcher. That requires more patience than I have. But I have done some, and I invite the researchers among us who have these gifts to help so that we can have a full accounting of our land's history, and also to build some relationships with the Native American community that's here. If we were to have an official land acknowledgement based on the cursory research I've done and some of the relationships I've built with the Native American community here, we might acknowledge the Kickapoo and Miami people. We might say at the start of our service, we acknowledge the Kickapoo and Miami people, the first people of this land we are on that was taken from them. We remember those who worked this land without choice or reward, and we honor the stewards of this land, past and present. Now, many congregations are also moving to pay what is known as real rent as part of this reconciliation process. They might give one offering a month or whatever they have decided upon with the tribe whose land they are on. And it is a way to defray some of the damage that has been done socioeconomically to local tribes. The biggest part of this all is that reconciliation requires ongoing, accountable relationship. So this isn't something that is done once. It is an ongoing conversation where we are not leaders, but co-conspirators who listen deeply. And then we participate in advocacy work when we're asked to, as a congregation. And I don't mean asking our Native American kin within our congregation to do this work, to be the relationship leaders. I think this is the work of those of us that are settlers. Our Native American kin among us will share what they need if they know, and when they're ready. It's like Valerie Kaur reminds us, sometimes we have to do work on our own before we can do work together. As you gather this holiday season around the table, I invite you to consider these practices, to research whose land your home is on, and to consider perhaps how to be in relationship and reconcile, maybe even in this with this conversation as a doorway to reconciliation in other areas of your life too. It's transformative work. And to prepare our hearts for this work, I want to invite you to share in a litany with me that was created by the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs. And I offer this litany to you not as a way to absolve us of responsibility for our mistakes or the mistakes of our ancestors, but as a means to transform ourselves, to lean into the hard work of reconciliation within, among, and beyond. Don't worry, I'm going to talk you through it. It's not written anywhere. We're going to do this with love and acceptance as we prepare our hearts. Now, your response is, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. I'm going to be with you through this the whole time. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time our greed has made us ignore the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the spirits, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For these and so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. The Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray ended her letter by stating, in truth, Thanksgiving celebrations have a long and rich history that predates the landing of the Pilgrims and the founding of the United States. There are many, many ways that we can connect in gratitude and celebrate the abundance of the fall harvest as a community without celebrating an ahistorical colonial origin story. She continues with, "This year, let us be grateful in a genuine manner. Let our gratitude flow from our deep, ongoing commitment to justice and equity. Let our gratitude grow from the opportunities we have to be together authentically, whether virtually or in person. Please join me," she says, "as we reimagine this day and gather in community to honor Indigenous ancestors' experiences and traditions. May it be a time to reflect and find meaning in how our shared values connect us." End quote. May it be so. Amen and blessed be. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing together hymn number 1010. We give thanks.
Yes. Please sing the harmonies if you so choose. And the choir is going to join you in those. Here we go. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
You may remain risen for these closing words by Laurel Littlejohn Gray. In the name of all that is complicated, may we enter this week gently. May we welcome all the guests that come to our table. The ambiguity of why bother this year, the joy of celebration and fresh-baked pie, the grief of the empty seat that can never be filled, the warmth of the candles lit in the dark, the malaise of all that we've been told about how to feed our body, the hope of reconnection, of feeling filled for the first time in a long time, the fear of, is it safe enough? The loving bustle of ancestry and recipe and tradition, the horror of history and all the ways it lives on. May we welcome all of these guests at our table and all others who come needing a place to call home. There is good news. There is space here, plenty of grace to share. In the name of all that is complicated, let us go. Amen and blessed be. You may be seated for the postlude.